Baghdad did not begin to fall when a foreign army reached its walls. It began to die when the sons of Harun al-Rashid turned their weapons on each other. This was the city of lamps, scholars, palaces, river gardens, and imperial dreams. But by the end of the siege, its streets would be barricaded, its markets burned, and its caliph would try to escape across the Tigris, not as a ruler, but as a hunted man. Before we enter the smoke of Baghdad, take a second to like this video and stay until the end, because the final hours of this siege reveal how a golden age can bleed from the inside. For generations, Baghdad seemed untouchable. It stood on the Tigris like the beating heart of the Abbasid world, a city of wealth, law, theology, science, and imperial ambition. But even the brightest capital can carry a wound beneath its marble. That wound was left by Harun al-Rashid. Before his death, he tried to solve the future by dividing it. His son, al-Amin, would inherit the caliphate first and rule from Baghdad. After him, succession was supposed to pass to his brother al-Ma'mun, who controlled the eastern provinces, especially Khorasan. On paper, it looked like balance. In reality, it placed two centers of power inside one empire and asked ambition to remain patient. Ambition rarely obeys. Al-Amin held the capital, the palace, and the prestige of immediate rule. Men around him whispered that a caliph should not wait for his authority to be taken by a distant brother. Al-Ma'mun, far to the east, held armies, administrators, and the loyalty of hard frontier soldiers. He was patient, calculating, and dangerous in a quieter way. The brothers represented two worlds inside the Abbasid state: the old prestige of Baghdad and the military strength of the eastern provinces. At first, the war was fought with ink. Oaths were questioned. Names were removed from official recognition. Letters traveled between courts. Governors hesitated. Courtiers whispered. Then al-Amin made the decision that turned a succession dispute into a war for the soul of the caliphate. He tried to remove al-Ma'mun from the line of succession and elevate his own son instead. The family quarrel became a civil war. Al-Amin sent an army east, expecting Baghdad's authority to crush resistance. But al-Ma'mun had Tahir ibn Hussein. Tahir did not need a glorious battle to prove himself. He understood morale, timing, fear, and the weakness hidden inside arrogance. At Rai, the army of al-Amin was broken. Its commander was killed. The myth that Baghdad could command victory simply by speaking was shattered. From that moment, the road to the capital began to darken. Al-Ma'mun's forces advanced westward. Cities bent. Officials changed sides. Men who had praised al-Amin in public began sending messages to his enemies in private. The empire loosened district by district, oath by oath, betrayal by betrayal. Baghdad understood that the war was no longer far away. It was coming home. When the siege closed around the capital, the conflict became something uglier than a campaign. It became an urban nightmare. The defenders of Baghdad were not one disciplined army beneath one pure banner. They were palace guards, loyal troops, local militias, armed citizens, unpaid soldiers, opportunists, and desperate men trying to survive inside a city becoming a battlefield. The attackers were not foreign invaders. They were soldiers of the same caliphate, fighting not to destroy the Abbasids, but to decide which Abbasid would rule. That was what made the siege poisonous. A foreign enemy can be hated cleanly. A brother cannot. Inside Baghdad, fear became daily life. Bread vanished first, then firewood, then trust. Families hid coins beneath floors, not knowing whether the next knock would be a soldier, a thief, or a neighbor. Broken doors became barricades. Rooftops became fighting positions. Markets became choke points. Mosques became places where people prayed while listening for the crash of war outside. The Tigris, once the shining artery of Baghdad, became a line of danger. Boats carried supplies, fugitives, soldiers, and rumors. Bridges became targets. River crossings became traps. The city that had once gathered knowledge now gathered smoke. Al-Amin remained inside the capital. He was still caliph. His name still carried sacred and political weight. But titles do not feed a hungry city. Titles do not stop soldiers from doubting. Titles do not force loyalty from men who believe the future has already chosen another ruler. Each day of siege made his authority smaller. Each defeat made the palace seem farther away from the streets it claimed to command. Outside the city, Tahir did not need to win in one blow. He needed time. Time weakens walls. Time ruins discipline. A commander loyal in the morning may become cautious by sunset. A hungry crowd does not ask about dynastic law. It asks when the suffering will end. The fighting was not the glorious battle imagined by court poets. It was close, dirty, and fragmented. Streets were taken, lost, and taken again. Men fought through alleys, courtyards, burned gates, and broken houses. Fires spread. Stones crashed into walls. Civil war destroys meaning before it destroys buildings. Some men fought because they believed al-Amin was rightful. Others feared revenge. Some fought for money. Some because their friends had been killed. In a collapsing city, violence becomes the only language that still seems to matter. The impossible odds were not only measured in numbers, they were measured in trust. Baghdad had to defend itself while doubting itself. Every commander wondered who would betray whom. Every noble had to decide whether loyalty was honorable or suicidal. Every soldier had to ask whether he was defending the caliphate or only prolonging the agony of one doomed man. As the siege dragged on, discipline decayed. Soldiers demanded pay. Armed groups controlled neighborhoods. Civilians suffered between rival forces. The palace remained magnificent, but magnificence had become irrelevant. Power was measured by who controlled the next gate, the next bridge, the next wall, the next crowd. And still Baghdad resisted. That is the terrible grandeur of the siege. The city did not collapse at the first strike. It endured. It burned and endured. It starved and endured. The people had no clean choice. Surrender might save them or expose them to revenge. Resistance might preserve honor or destroy everything left. By the final phase, al-Amin's world had narrowed to reports of failure, shrinking loyalties, and the sound of defeat approaching street by street. The brother he had tried to disinherit was no longer a distant rival in the east. Al-Mamun had become the shadow over Baghdad. Al-Amin tried to survive the logic of collapse. Negotiations were attempted. Escape became thinkable. But in civil war, surrender is rarely clean. Too much blood had been spilled. A living defeated caliph could become a symbol, and symbols are dangerous. In such moments, politics often demands a body. At last, al-Amin attempted to flee across the Tigris. The river that had once carried the wealth of the Abbasid world became the stage of imperial humiliation. The caliph, ruler of Baghdad, heir to Harun al-Rashid, was reduced to a hunted man moving through the wreckage of his own capital. The guards, banners, palace rituals, and claims of destiny fell away. What remained was fear. He was captured. He was no longer the master of Baghdad. He was a prisoner of the war he had brought into its streets. The dynasty that had raised him now had no place for him alive. Then he was killed. His death marked more than the fall of one ruler. An Abbasid caliph had been violently overthrown and executed by forces loyal to another Abbasid claimant. Al-Mamun had won, but victory did not feel like healing. It felt like exhaustion. The caliphate survived, but something sacred had cracked. The siege proved that Baghdad could be attacked from within the Abbasid world. It proved that a caliph could be hunted, captured, and killed. It proved that legitimacy was not protected by bloodline alone. It needed armies, money, loyalty, and fear. Al-Mamun would later be remembered for scholarship, translation, theology, and the flourishing of learning. But the road to his reign passed through the suffering of Baghdad. History often praises what rulers build, yet the foundations of power are sometimes laid over ruins. The Siege of Baghdad matters because it shows a truth older than empire itself. Great states rarely fall only because enemies gather beyond the frontier. They weaken when trust collapses inside the palace. They bleed when ambition becomes stronger than restraint. They burn when rulers mistake the people for fuel to feed their own destiny. Two brothers inherited a golden age. One held the capital, one held the east, and between them, Baghdad became the battlefield. War turns private ambition into public ruin. It transforms a dispute over succession into hunger, smoke, betrayal, and bodies in the river. Kings and caliphs speak of legitimacy, divine favor, and necessity. Cities remember differently. They remember the doors breaking. They remember the fires. They remember the ordinary people who paid for the dreams of princes. If this story pulled you into the darker side of the Abbasid Golden Age, leave a like and tell us in the comments which ruined city, doomed dynasty, or impossible siege should come next. History remembers the kings, but here, we follow the smoke they left behind.